With my college football schedule preview and point spread prediction videos. Today I'll be doing the Iowa State Cyclones. Iowa State's non-conference schedule is the same as it's always been. They play Iowa in the rivalry game, and they play two little teams. This year it's South Dakota and Arkansas State. South Dakota's a FCS team, and Arkansas State's a group of five team. It is unusual that they would play a team like Arkansas State on the road, but Iowa State will win both of those and shouldn't be any problem for them. But Iowa will be a tough game, even though I don't think that this is a very tough non-conference schedule overall. Iowa, I would take it Iowa State in that game right now because not only is it at home, Iowa, I'm not really expecting much from them this season. But it's a really tough way to start the season playing against Kansas State. They're a physical team, and they've got a really good coach. And as good as their run game is, Iowa State is very likely going to need a good front seven to beat Kansas State, unless Kansas State has one of their fluke games like they did last year against Houston. But Avery Johnson, while I don't think he's as good of a passer as Rocco Beck is, he's a better runner than Rocco Beck is, and uh, Avery Johnson is one of the fastest players in college football. And Iowa State's conference schedule is a lot different this year than last year because they play six different opponents. So last year they played Houston, Baylor, West Virginia, Central Florida, Texas Tech, and Utah. And this year instead they will play Arizona, Colorado, BYU, Arizona State, TCU, and Oklahoma State. And that makes this conference schedule a lot harder, I think, than it was last year. I think this is a pretty tough schedule overall for Iowa State because this year they play the other two of the top three teams in the Big 12 conference from last season. Arizona State and BYU, and those six opponents that I just named that they played last year, none of them were top teams in the conference. And to make it even tougher, they play those two teams in a row. That's almost as tough as it gets, I would say, for a two in a row in the Big 12 this year, but not quite because they do get to play them both at home. But also having to play at TCU right after that is going to make it a tough three in a row because TCU was one of the better teams in the Big 12 conference last season. But BYU's at quarterback, Retzloff, uh, could be one of the best at quarterbacks in the conference this year. He had a good year last year. And their coach, Kalani Sitake, I've become pretty high on after the year that BYU had last year. And Arizona State, you would have to think would be a tough one for Iowa State because not only did they destroy Iowa State in the conference championship last season, Arizona State ranked second in the country in returning production at 79%. But Iowa State's first bye week, I would say, comes at a good time because it comes after two road games in a row and right before the BYU game. BYU right now, I would think would probably be one of the best teams in the conference again. But to have to play uh, two in a row on the road, I'd say Iowa State got it pretty good because Cincinnati and Colorado, I think, are both going to be bad teams. Now, I am saying that Colorado is not going to be nine wins this season, uh, but I'm not saying that they're going to be 4-8 like they were in 23, and I'm also not saying that Colorado can't pull an upset. And the same goes for Cincinnati. So it wouldn't be surprising if Iowa State were to lose one of these games. And it's nice where their second bye week it comes because it comes right after it's going to be the toughest three in a row on their schedule. And right before a game against Kansas, that is also going to be a tough game because even though Kansas was 5-7 last year, they beat Iowa State last year, and Kansas was probably the best 5-7 team in the country because I think they were better than their record would make you think because they just did really bad in close games to where if they would have won all their close games they would have been 10-2 but Iowa State, I think, has a good chance with this schedule to get to 10 wins again. But there's also a good chance that the season could go wrong for them and they could only have like 7 wins. So now moving on to the point spread prediction games in the green are games where I think Iowa State will be favored to win by a blowout, which is 20 or more points. And there's two of those, South Dakota and Arkansas State. Games in the blue are games where I think Iowa State will be favored to win by 10 to 19 points, and there's three of those Arizona, Cincinnati, and Oklahoma State. Games in the pink are games where I think Iowa State will be favored to win by about a field goal, which is at 1 to 5 points. And there's six of those Kansas State, Iowa, Colorado, BYU, Arizona State, and Kansas. And games in the gray or games where I think Iowa State will be about a field goal underdog, so 1 to 5 points, and there's one of those at TCU. So South Dakota, Iowa State should be favored to win that one by 40 or more points, and Arkansas State, Iowa State should be favored in that one by at least 30 points. And Arizona, because it's a home game, I'll say Iowa State will be favored by around 2 touchdowns in that one. But Cincinnati and Oklahoma State, because they're on the road, I'll say the spread will be more like 10 points. And Kansas State, I think that Iowa State will be favored in that one by, I'll say, 3 points because Iowa State has beat Kansas State the last 2 years. And Iowa, I think Iowa State will be favored in that one by, I'll say, 3 points. But that would be in the gray if it was a road game. And Colorado would be in the purple if it was a home game, but because it's on the road, I'll say Iowa State will be favored by about 3. And BYU and Arizona State, those games are only in the pink because they're home games. If they were road games, they'd be in the gray. and it wouldn't be shocking if Iowa State ends up being an underdog in one or both of those games when it comes time for them to be played. But right now, I'll say Iowa State will be favored by a point in both of them. And Kansas, because it's a home game for Iowa State, and if you actually compared rosters between the two, it'd probably make more sense for it to be a purple game. But because Kansas beat them last year, I put it in the pink. I'll say Iowa State will be favored by 3 or 4 points in that one. And TCU, that one's in the gray because it's a road game. It'd be in the pink if it was at home. I'll say TCU will be favored by about a point in that one, but it wouldn't be surprising if when it comes time for it, if Iowa State was favored or if it was a toss up. But that three in a row of BYU, Arizona State, and TCU, I don't see any chance that Iowa State gets out of that at 3-0. And I think there's a good chance that they could lose two of those three. But that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.